Hi, I'm Anne. Welcome back to my channel. And today we are going to be doing Count to 10 with me book tag medieval edition. As you guys know, I am for the next 2 months completely immersing myself into everything medieval. So I decided to do this tags prompts with a medieval lens. So all the books that I pick out can only be medieval. So as far as I know, this was actually created by the Bumbling Blogger's partner, and I was tagged by Penguin Pages. Number 1 is the first book in a series, and I went with The Frog Princess by E.D. Baker. This is a retelling of the Frog Prince story, but instead of the frog turning into a prince, when the princess kisses him, she turns into a frog. Thus, they're both frogs. And they have to go on an adventure to try to solve why exactly they're frogs. This was one of my favorite middle grade books when I was younger, and this is the first book of a series of, I believe the main series is 4 books, but it continued on, and I wasn't a big fan of it after that because there were different characters as the main characters and not the 2 main ones. Emma and Edric. Number 2 is 2 or more copies of the same book. This one was difficult because I rarely buy 2 copies of the same book, but I do have this one because one is more of my reading copy and one is more of my aesthetic pretty copy, and that is The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. And even though it is, I don't know if you would categorize this as medieval. I believe this takes place in the 1600s. So technically not medieval, but it is close enough to the medieval era that I am counting it, and I don't own a lot of medieval books in multiple formats. So this one was the copy that I read when I was a teenager, and this was the copy I recently purchased from Book Outlet, and I purchased it basically for the aesthetic. Number 3, 3 colors on the cover. This one I chose the Song of Roland. This one is translated by Dorothy L. Sayers. This was a medieval text which we're not actually sure who wrote it. It is set around the 700s, so earlier than I thought it was, so very early medieval era, and it is basically about a campaign, a war campaign, but I saw it and I saw the cover, and you can see that it is a lot more than just 3 colors on it. You have red, there's some purples, there's also some greens, whites, gold, so there's a lot of colors going on in this cover of like this battle. Number 4, 4 or more perspectives. Surprisingly, this was very easy. I thought this would be hard, but since it is medieval, and this one is pretty medieval even though it is medieval fantasy, I'm going to go with Malice by John Gwynne. I believe this has more than 4 perspectives, but I think there are 4, I would say, main perspectives, but there are more secondary perspectives that come in just every once in a while. So this is a high medieval fantasy. It is very heavy on the medieval and lower on the fantasy, especially in the first book, I would say, because it very much gets into the world of survival. And yes, there are giants, but the battles are much more based on like real medieval, as opposed to, you know, just randomly magic solves everything. Number 5, a 5-star read. I have a lot of these that are medieval, but I decided to go with The Ballad of the White Horse by G.K. Chesterton. This is told in a style of poetry, and if you didn't know, G.K. Chesterton was a 20th century writer, and yet he wrote this poem as if it were in the style of like an early medieval Saxon type epic poem. It talks about the defense of England headed by Alfred the Great against the Saxons, I believe. Oh, the Danes in 878. Number 6, 6 or more short stories. I could have picked a couple other ones that I have. I have Norse mythology here, but I decided to go with Russian fairy tales. This book contains a lot of medieval Russian fairy tales. Some of them are more modern fairy tales from, like, say, the 17th, 18th centuries, but all the stories within here, even though they may not date back to the medieval era, feel very medieval. Number 7, a 7 on the cover or spine. You do not know how hard this was. The number 9 is like the harder one, the one that was slightly harder, but this one was incredibly difficult because I have no books that have 7 on the title or on the cover or the spine. However, I did find this one and it counts, and I actually just purchased it this week from my vintage bookstore that I work at. And it's the late Middle Ages from 1272 to 1485. So it has the 7 in the dates. Number 8 is 8 letters in the title. And unfortunately, I haven't read this one, but I have read another book in the series, and I'm not a huge fan of this series. My husband has read this book, and he loves this, and so it's his copy, but it's Metmio by Brian Jacques. This is part of the Redwall series. If you've never heard of it, it's basically an amorphic where there are animals that talk and do human type things. So basically it is a story of medieval animals that go on adventures. The reason I really just could not get into this series because the books are spoken in the lingo. The accents are written on the page, which makes it very hard to actually read. I'll give you just a random example. Absolutely spittin', I say, Hugo, you old pan wobbler, do you need a good steady pod fellow to help you to serve the old trout woot? Like, it's all spelled horribly. And I feel like if I actually listened to these on audiobooks, I would enjoy them more. But like trying to decipher what the people are saying or the animals are saying, it's just too much for me. But this is the only like fantasy medieval book I could find which had 8 letters in the title. I don't know if none of the other fantasy books I had or medieval books I had 8 letters in the title. Number 9, a book which ends on a page ending in a 9, which was the hardest prompt for me to figure out. I was looking through all my medieval and fantasy books because I was like, I cannot find any of them. And I finally did it, and it is The Posse of Princesses by Sherwood Smith. This is just a fun, light medieval fantasy about these girls who go to this kingdom, and I think in the beginning they're kind of competing to, 1, to learn how to be a lady, and 2, to get the attention of this eligible prince. And so it's a comedy, it's a light fantasy. It does indeed end on a page. It ends on page 299. There we go. And number 10, the final prompt is 10 books in a series. I don't know if the prompt means it has to have at least 10 books in the series, because that would be a lot easier to answer, but I decided to make it difficult on myself and say, oh, it has to be exactly 10 books in a series, which there's not many series out there that are fantasy medieval that are also 10 books in the series. So I kind of cheated with this one. I'm going to go with Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. And this one currently has 9 books, and a 10th one has been announced, so it's not out yet. Saying that doesn't mean that 10 books is the end of the series. It could have a lot more than 10 books. I've only read the first book myself, so I feel like this is cheating a little bit, but currently, technically, it has 10 books in the series, even though 1 isn't out, so I'm counting it. At first I was like, oh, I should tag 10 booktubers because, you know, it's count to 10 with me, book tag. But then I realized that would be a lot of booktubers, so I decided to stick with 5 because I feel like that's still a lot more than I usually tag. So I'm going to tag Joe and Mary from Book Buds, Mark from Book Time with Alvis, Hannah from Hannah's Blog, Shelly from Shelly Swearigan, and Jack from Spread Book Joy. I'm not sure if any of these people have been tagged before. If they have, just ignore me. And also, I am not obligating anyone to do this tag whether or not I have tagged them. But if you want to do this tag, whether or not you were tagged by me, do it, and I'd love to see your answers, especially if you choose a specific theme to answer the questions like I did, or if you just decide to go with a general answers. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!